Hey everyone, welcome to Past Lives and the Divine. I'm Gina, the host of this podcast, and in today's episode, I am reflecting on where I'm at today through the lens of my very first past life regression. So last week's episode 163, I shared the recording of my very first past life regression, and that session took place in 2015. So that episode, in last week's episode, originally aired in 2019. So last week's episode, go tune into that, listen to the past life regression session from 2015, hear me talk about where I was at that moment when I was reflecting on it in 2019. And today I'm talking about where I'm at 8 years after that first past life regression. So specifically, I'm going to talk about how I still think about this past life regression, why or what I'm thinking about when I do. I'll be talking about specifically my husband in this past life regression. This was a person I did not know at the time of doing the session. This is a person I'm not connected to at all 8 years later, but we did overlap in life in some ways for a little bit, after this past life regression, which I'll get into. And then I'll also be talking about differences, just me now in 2023, me then in 2019, and then me way back then in 2015 when I originally had this session done. So woven in there, I had asked for questions. Some of you emailed me some questions. I got some questions on Instagram. And so really, I just wanted to know, as you were listening to last week's episode, re-listening to that past life experience of mine, if you had any specific questions or topics you wanted me to cover. So some of you let me know. So I have kind of woven those topics in as well. And just to let you know, if you listen to this, I'm open to talking more. I mean, some of it might vary, but I'm open to talking more about anything I cover today. And so if you listen and you have a question, I would love to hear it. And you can always email me at Gina, that's Jina, at pastlivesandthedivine.com. I am really proud of the life I've created, the changes I've made. I'm really proud of just how my relationship with Alex, my ex-husband, how that has grown and evolved. And so I don't know how far to go into any of these topics, but my life has changed so much since 2019 when I originally aired this past life regression session from 2015. So it was a little bit daunting for me to be like, okay, what am I going to cover in this episode? Because I feel like I'm totally different. I feel like my life is totally different. So here's what I'm saying. I'm taking a crack at it right now. And I'm sure there's going to be holes and blind spots and things where you're like, wait, what? And so if you have a question, if you want to hear more about my journey in a specific area or something that I mentioned today, please email me and let me know. I want to know. I can't promise to have a whole podcast episode on something that you might email me about, but it is something that I do want to talk more about. I don't know what capacity that would come in. And I just know that when I hear all of your guys' feedback and questions, it always gives me so many ideas of what to do with the ideas that I'm getting. So hit me with those questions if you have them. One more thing before we dive in. If you want to support this podcast, you can share this episode with a friend or share a different episode with a friend. That's a great way to get people hooked on a podcast, is to send them a specific episode you think they're going to like. I always do that. I love listening to, right now I'm listening to a lot of comedy podcasts, and there are certain friends who I want to talk about that with. And so I will send them specific episodes that I know are going to hook them, and then we can talk about it. So if that's you, I want to encourage you to send this episode or a different episode to a friend. Also, leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening, specifically on Apple Podcasts. That does really help the podcast. That's what I hear. And just to know, I appreciate you way more than you'll ever know. Okay, are you ready? Gather around the fire for my reflection, where I'm at now 8 years after my first past life regression. I'm not really even sure where to begin, so I'm just going to start talking. When I think back to this first past life regression, I'm like so thankful that I did it. It not only changed me permanently in that session, but it changed the way I think. It changed the go-to therapy I use when I need relief or can see like a pattern within me that I want to change. And hypnosis is like what I do now. I'm a past life regression facilitator. I lead sessions that help people connect to their spirit guides, their ancestors, their higher self, all kinds of things, all kinds of adventures. And never did I think that I would be a hypnotist. Certainly not in 2015. I did not think that I would be a hypnotist. So I look back on who I was in 2015, and I was someone who, as I described in that recording that you can listen to in last week's episode 163, like I said, my intention for the session was to go in and understand my fear of commitment, and I realized it was a fear of failure. And I think right there is why hypnosis is so great, because we have our own illusions about who we are and the life that we have. And when we go into an altered state like hypnosis and we're guided and we have our own intentions and our own focus, we are able to see our lives from an angle or with this certain clarity that we don't get where we're in just the third dimension, regular, awake, alert state. And that is something that started in this session in 2015. And to be, I honestly feel like that version of me is like a little sister, which is interesting. Not something I've ever experienced before. So when I think back to that time, I was also into like years into a romantic partnership with Alex. And he is, in my understanding, he was just someone who was very safe for me. He was a very safe container. If you know anything about like attachment theory, insecure or secure attachment, he to this day continues to be like one of the very few like secure attachments I have in my life. And being with him allowed me to like really kind of relax on a deep level and sink into truths about myself that frankly would have been a little too scary, like without an emotional support system. So I am forever grateful for that. And I am forever grateful for all of a sudden in 2014, 2015, feeling like maybe I do want to get married to this man, because in that created this really safe container for me. And I needed that. And him and I obviously wasn't the perfect match since we're divorced. And we always, like at the heart of who we were, had this deep like fondness for who each other were. And maybe someone would label that like, oh, you started out as friends. But it really is like this reverence for who each other are and this great love. And not only do I feel that for who he is, but I feel that for like what he gave me, like the illusion of safety that we can get from someone who is so loving. And it's not all an illusion, but you know, we can never control someone else on some level. It is an illusion. And that doesn't mean to make it less beautiful. That just means what other illusions can I create that make me feel good? I guess that's where I'm going with that. So at that time of doing this session in 2015, I wanted to like be with Alex to the nth degree, to whatever. And marriage in this culture is the way, and it's safe, and we're all programmed to think it's safe. And even me, I never grew up dreaming of my wedding. I never visualized myself being married even. And so to be thinking about getting married and to be like, I'm going to some kind of therapy or healing in order to get myself there was just this like kind of a surprising place for me to be in as well. It was like this, like, whoa, I can't believe I want this. So that's where I was, and I'm glad I did that session. I'm glad I explored it. I'm glad I had the courage to do it. And honestly, like, that was 8 years ago. And then on Past Lives in the Divine, I shared that recording and just a reflection of where I was at that time of the podcast episode recording. And that was in 2019. And in 2019, I was, in 2015, I was living in a condo downtown with Alex, 800 square feet, 1 bed, 1 bath. Oh, so disciplined in like minimalism. And it was great for my financial life, but it was such a contractive, oppressive time and based on where I lived and how I was feeling. So in 2015, I wanted to get married. I was going to hypnosis for it. I did this past life regression. I lived in a tiny ass condo smack in the middle of downtown Minneapolis, right beside a freeway on-ramp, in the middle of 5 years straight of construction that only got closer to our building. So it was kind of like, I look at it as like, I couldn't live there. Like today, I could not live there. Like it's too cramped. It's too crowded. It's too loud. It's too overstimulating. But I felt so held in that little condo. And I think that for me, it was similar to marriage, of like this idea of kind of like this safety within chaos. So in 2019, as I was recording that, I had been married for 4 years, and is that right? Married for 4 years. Yes. And still living in that condo downtown. But what's so bizarre is how memory works, because when I think of recording that podcast, that episode 2 of Past Lives in the Divine, you can listen to it. It's the previous episode 163. I re-aired it, so you don't have to go all the way back if you don't want to. And when I recorded that, I was like 2 weeks out from my first panic attack in 7 years. And I think it's crazy looking back on it, because it was like I had this panic attack that was so overwhelming. And not only is a panic attack overwhelming, but then I can easily add emotion onto it. And I was feeling a lot of feelings of like despair and failure within this panic, because I was panicking and because I had gone 7 years without a panic attack and really felt like I was doing good to like then be snapped back to it. I can really like kind of catastrophize, like it's always going to be this way, very trauma brain oriented, I think. So I think it's just interesting that when I think of recording the podcast, I think of feeling good. But when I zoom out a little bit, even just 2 weeks, I was like a mess. Emotionally, I was a mess. And what was happening was like, just outside around the condo I was living in, the construction just got closer and closer. And the construction was like, not a single level little home or store. It's like, a 8-floor building with, pounding and, like block shaking, pounding for 6 months straight. And it was road construction. It was just this overwhelming feeling of like this noise is just like, I cannot get away from it. And it felt like the walls were closing in on me. And I would just get this vision of like this expansive landscape that was just like flat, but there was trees, but sometimes there'd be hills. It was just, I was like, I'm not ready to move to the country, but oh my God, if it's that or this, like I can't do this anymore. So at that time, we had started like, I don't know, a month later or 2 months later, had started the process of like selling the condo and moving to a house that just wasn't in the middle of a fucking, decades long construction zone. And So recording that podcast, I just think it's interesting, like how when things happen to me, and I'd imagine a lot of you are like this maybe, but they seem both catastrophic, but then I'm also able to like compartmentalize. So just kind of interesting. Since then, moved to a little suburb right outside the city center and lived there for a couple years, and basically suffered a south node eclipse in my first house among a midlife crisis and some other things going on. And just a year and a half ago was like, I can't fucking live in Minnesota anymore, and I'm moving. And I'm going to get a little bit more into these things as well as we kind of uncover as I go layer by layer into this past life regression. But now I am divorced. I live in Arizona. I do hypnosis for work. I still do hypnosis for work. That work has changed. I now have a training. I now have a membership group. And yeah, okay, so that's kind of a snapshot, I guess, probably a shitty snapshot of where I'm at right now. But let's get into it. How I'm still thinking about this past life regression years later. How I think about this past life regression, or what I think about within this past life experience, is really kind of dependent on what I'm going through. But it is something that is very close to the surface of my memory. And one of the things that I think about a lot is, in that past life experience, there was a scene, and again, listen to episode 163 if you have not done so already, just to understand what it is I'm talking about. But in that past life regression, there was this past life memory that I had where I was at a mealtime memory with my husband, and within me was just this feeling of sadness, like, this relationship right now is nowhere near what it was. And it was like something I had that was so good and I lost it. And I thought of it as like all my fault. And it was this feeling of like being able to see in real time this idea of like taking someone or something for granted and still not being able to do anything about it. It's like I was just aware of it and couldn't change it, didn't know what to change, and it just felt so terrible. To me, that is such a strong memory that I don't think that I'm going to be on my deathbed in my life as Gina, feeling like I've taken someone or something for granted. And if I do, I'm also working on compassion. And if I do, I will see that like I did the best I could at those times. But honestly, it's easy for me when I love someone or something, like I want the best for them. And if the best for them is not me, like I still want the best for them. Like when I love, that's how I feel. To me, it feels like a lot of people, when they love, they want you to do certain things and not do other things. And there's just like a lot of control involved. And not just romantic love, families, friends, like I think we kind of do it a lot on some level. And I'm sure some people feel like I take them for granted. What I'm saying is I personally am not carrying that in this life. And one of the reasons is because of this past life memory. That feeling was so strong at that mealtime scene. And I think about that. I think about that a lot. And especially in a relationship like I have with Alex, where we were romantically partnered, we were married, and now we're divorced and creating something new. I don't have a script for what we're creating, where it's like we still love each other deeply. We're like family. We're not romantically connected. I don't want to live with him. I'm living alone. How do we create that? And for me, a guiding force is like just feeling like I'm honoring who he is and what we have together. And I think it gets easier for me to do that. It gets easier for me to identify like, oh, I'm kind of taking this for granted because I've had this experience, this entire past life that I experienced in this 2015 past life regression. So much of it was about just this deep regret for not like appreciating or living or just like feeling as much as I could. And it just got really turned up in me. And I'm so thankful for that. It was a sad experience. It was a heavy experience at times, but I carry that with me for sure. Another thing I think when I think of about that past life, this has come more clearly into my view in the last year since moving to Arizona. When I first experienced that past life regression, I had said the setting was kind of like an Old West situation, and I wasn't familiar with the area I live in 2015, and nor was I in 2019 when I shared that session and recorded that podcast episode. But today here, I can tell you that being in northern Arizona, I've lived lifetimes here. I've never felt so at home on land. And it's not like, oh, I can identify all the trees and stuff. I mean, I'm working on it. I think that's fun. It's kind of my hobby. But it's more so like the feeling I get from the land, the feeling I get when the sun rises, the feeling I get when I watch a sunset, the feeling I get under the high noon sun on a couple of the different hikes that I do around here that are my favorites. It's like, it just feels like echoes of the most beautiful moments of past lives where I have been living on and appreciating this land for so long. And I hadn't really tied this first past life regression I had in 2015 to this area that I live now in northern Arizona. But now listening to it, sitting here at my desk, like looking at the landscape around me, it's like, oh my gosh, I think this might have been a life in northern Arizona, or at the very least, like same kind of vibe, same kind of feel as like that Southwest, like high desert situation. So I think that was really cool. Yeah. And it's just like the ease of like the dry heat and even like the blowing dust, things I felt in that past life in that area that like I didn't express them in the past life regression, but like the way the wind was, the dust, like all of that felt very familiar and comfortable. And it's very much how I feel here now. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I feel like when we experience a soul knowing like that, to me, it's just like a nod, I'm on the right path, or a nod that like, see, you've already always known. Even when you didn't know that you knew, you've known. Another thing that really sticks with me from that past life regression was the past life memory or the past life scene where I met my husband in that past life. If you remember, I was like on kind of a busy street, but it was a small street, so it wouldn't take a lot of people to make it feel busy. It was like I said, an Old West situation. I was with friends. I had like a bag of stuff in each arm, and we were laughing and just totally present, totally in the moment, being light, making fun of each other, and all of my whatever I was carrying in my arms like fell and was all over the ground. And we were laughing about that, and I like smacked right into this man. And the feeling I got when I smacked into him and just like, whoa, like who he was and our relationship as it unfolded from there, it was really just this feeling of like, how could this have happened? Like I was having so much fun. And then I met this person who's like so amazing. It's like, honestly, it feels like it opened up a part of my brain to be like, life can be even better than you think. Even when you feel like you're so full and you're so present and you're so joyful and you're just like vibrant, thrilled to be alive, it can get even better if you let it. And that scene to me lives so strongly in my heart. And because I can very much be like a prepare for the worst case situation kind of person, that is good, but it can also lead to like heaviness, paranoia, catastrophe thinking, all of those things. Like that's the shadow side of it. So when I start going down more like the shadow side of like catastrophizing and that, I will often think about this of just like that feeling of feeling so in the moment and so happy with like the simplicity of just like joyful connection with a few people. And then to run into someone who like brings you even more love, connection, and belonging, and just in this really carefree, unintentional way. And the intention really was like just to be here and to enjoy. And that's about it. And how beautiful life can be when we actually do that. And that continually gets echoed in my mind. And I can't even explain all of the ways. But the one way that's sticking out in my mind right now as I talk about this is, I'm going to go off on a little tangent. When I like certain writers, like there are certain writers that I love, and it's because when they write, it's like they have my same brain, but they just understand it a little bit more than I do. And then they talk about it, and then I learn a little bit more about myself. It's helpful because it's like echoing messages, echoing different threads, echoing different storylines that have the same themes of things that I want in my life. And certain writers do that for me. The memory of this past life scene where I was like just carefree, happy, present, and then met someone who would bring even more joy into my life. Like it's all just a reminder for me. Another thing that's coming into mind is like a year and a half ago or so, I had like a day where I did some mushrooms at home, which for me to do mushrooms alone is like just having an 8-hour hypnosis session, which I don't want. I love hypnosis. I love the deep thinking. I love the kind of different point of view on my life, but it's just a long, long time for me to be like in that space. So regardless, this day that I was doing mushrooms at home, I had this feeling of like, I just had this feeling like I was starting over. I was starting a lot of things over. I wanted to be different ways in different relationships. I wanted to feel differently with where I lived. I was just going through a lot. And so I wanted just a day to kind of get creative, think about it. And this feeling came in of, I just want to be enjoying life and then meet people who are enjoying life the same way. And then that's how I will meet my people, whether it's friends that are like family, lovers that are like family, lovers that are like friends, whatever. Like that's how I want to meet people. And right away when I had that thought, it reminded me of this memory from this past life of being with my friends, laughing, dropping all my shit, laughing about that, running into this man, having a good time with him, allowing him to get caught up in our energy, enjoying that. And it just echoes that within me. And it's like, I need to hear a message over and over before it sinks in sometimes. And that is a part of that past life regression that I still take with me 8 freaking years later. And then another thing along this line of like being present, enjoying my life, enjoying the connection around me is something else that came up in that past life regression. And something I think about a lot is this feeling that I used to be overwhelmed with so often. And it's like this feeling of like being alone, being in silence, like really loud, agitating silence, if that's a thing. And just this feeling of like waiting, always waiting. And like this waiting and this resentment, or this waiting and this aloneness would like turn into resentment. And I felt this then so much, like every day. And since then, since that session, the normalcy of that feeling just being in my life every day was gone. It was eliminated after that session. Just experiencing that past life, understanding this silence, understanding just this feeling of what it is to be in this deep waiting, this aloneness and the resentment that I was placing on my husband in that life. And so experiencing that past life and experiencing a life filled with that waiting and that aloneness and that resentment really allowed me to like release all of that. And now in life, because life is spiralic and we encounter similar things over and over, any time in the future that I find myself waiting or feeling alone and waiting for someone else, now instead of just being in that as if that's reality, since that past life regression 8 years ago, that feeling within me is so loud that if I feel it, even just the slightest bit, I'm like, shit, I'm waiting. I'm alone. I'm about to blame this on someone else. And instead, I have slowly shifted my hobbies, how quickly I can move into a hobby, their proximity to me, how easy it is to access this hobby. And that was really in an effort to, anytime I felt like, oh, I'm waiting, it was like, if I'm waiting, I'm wasting my own time. Like, what could I do? I don't want to wait for someone else. And it's like, I resented waiting for other people so much that I never wanted people to wait for me. So then I would spend more time waiting for other people, which was just some fucked up, stupid ass loop that I don't feel like I'm in anymore. But with that memory, it's like now if I encounter anything that evokes that within me, it's so strong and it's so easy to identify and it's so easy to take care of. And after 8 years, I've built a life that I'm rarely waiting for someone, which I grew up waiting for my mom. I grew up waiting for my sisters. It was like the moment I wasn't waiting for my sisters, I was waiting for Alex. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm always done early and I'm always fucking waiting. And it drives me bananas. And now I have a life where it's like I'm rarely waiting for someone. And if I find myself even in that waiting space that's building resentment, I identify it so quickly. And it's like, I'll go on a walk. I'll go on a bike ride. I'll read this book. I'll color these mandalas. I'll research this thing that's been gnawing at my brain. I'll do this meditation to connect with my ancestors I've been meaning to do. There's a million things I want to do. And that is like unintentional, meaning I can't say I've been journaling about it. I've been writing affirmations about it. I've been putting it in my planner. It just happened. And that's the beauty of hypnosis. It's like we make these things known to us that were once on a subconscious level or unconscious level, and it's so easy to identify and fix in the future. And sometimes just that act of making the unconscious conscious is enough for us to let it go. It's amazing. So another thing about that waiting, specifically in this past life regression from 2015, that waiting came for me when I was like home alone waiting for my husband to come back from working the land or livestock or whatever he did for our family. And like I said, after the session, this feeling of waiting and resentment was immediately erased. It was just not something that it just didn't even come up. Again, making the unconscious conscious, it's easy to see like, oh, that's not a thing anymore, you know? It's kind of like when you walk into a building and maybe the person working at the front desk gives you some attitude and you're like, what the fuck? Why is that person such an asshole? And then maybe you go talk to someone else and they're like, oh, did you see, so-and-so at the front desk? Oh yeah, they're having a bad day because, they were diagnosed with this thing, or this person died in their life, or their pet is having an issue. And all of a sudden we see it from a different point of view. And now, bam, just like that, we have compassion instead of frustration or agitation towards that person. And that's how we can shift how we see ourselves and how we see our lives in a past life regression. It can be so clear that it's just automatic. Now, currently, Gina, September 2023, I'm currently like unveiling just kind of how deep my, I guess I'll say like not enoughness, I'm not enough, things aren't for me goes. And if my clients teach me anything, it's that it's very human condition to struggle with this idea of not enoughness and all the flavors it can take on in one person's life, let alone a whole planet of people in their lives. So I'm very much in the middle of kind of like my own expansion through another layer of that. But what's interesting is feeling that in my current life in 2023 and listening to this past life regression and reflecting on where I was in 2015 when I had the session and 2019 when I first aired the episode. Man, I can see back then so clearly because of what I'm going through now that, well, I'll say it's the scene where I was getting, or the memory, the scene where it was my wedding day in that past life. And it was almost like I couldn't even enjoy it because I couldn't believe it. Like, why would he want to marry me? And just this idea of like, he's better than me. When I had that session in 2015, when I recorded that podcast episode in 2019, that felt very much like reality. And what I'm uncovering right now, the shit that keeps me crying, currently, it's like, damn, I had that back then. I couldn't even see it. He's better than me. Why would he want to marry me? And it's like the idea of like trying to teach a fish that they're swimming in water. They're like, it's just the world around me, you know, like it was just the air I breathed of like feeling like these people are legitimately better people than me. And in 2023, I'm like, no one's better than anybody. Like that is what I feel in my heart. That is the reality. That is what sticks out to me right now. And I can logically see in my life how just whatever that thread is, why would someone want to marry me? He is better than me. The sadness, the grief, the pain that's underneath that, I am experiencing a deep pool of what the fuck that is and seeing for the first time in my life like how much that has held me back not only from like if something's offered to me, like maybe rejecting it, you know, on the smallest level, like love or compliment from a stranger or something like that, but it affects my life and like the opportunities that I think are for me. And I consistently have this really, really gnawing, deep, draining feeling of like boredom, or is this it? This is it. This is life. This is what all the hullabaloo is about. And I know it's like a boredom of not pushing myself, ? Push isn't the right word, but like trusting myself, seeing myself as good enough or whatever enough to take opportunities, to create my own opportunities. And yeah, I don't know, that's pretty gray area. It's pretty confusing to me. It's like white hot. It's not as white hot painful as it was a couple of weeks ago when I feel like it really dropped in, but yeah, more to come. More to come on that. But that was something looking back 4 years, looking back 8 years, I was like, damn, why would he want to marry me? He's better than me. And that was just like the air I breathe. That's like the sky being blue. That's the grass being green. And Gina today is just like, if that's what you truly think, you should fucking figure that out. And I am. I don't think that stuff anymore, but it's more like in my brain, it hasn't settled in my heart or how I make decisions yet, but we're getting there. Yay. So the next thing I want to talk about that I think of often from this session 8 years ago is when Eric, the hypnotist who was working with me in that session, after the death scene, into the space of spiritual guidance, we were kind of digging into the feelings of that life and just kind of reworking the memory. And I think this modality probably has a few names. Some people call it re-scripting. That's how I was taught it, where you basically take a memory and in that painful memory, you do something different. And then you acknowledge what beautiful changes that would make if you would have done that different, and you just allowed that to be the reality for a moment and give your body, your mind, your heart a new experience. And then to say, and now let's extrapolate this out, and like, day after day, small decisions toward love, toward connection. What does that mean for this relationship and my life experience years down the road? And I don't know if you remember specifically, but where I went to first was that mealtime scene where I was really thinking about like, man, this relationship is so far from what it was, and it made me so sad. And Eric prompted me to like really meld with myself sitting at that table. And I don't remember the details exactly, but I said something to my husband, and he looked at me, and his eyes went from like vacant, tired, exhausted to like vibrant and full of life. And we both started laughing. And it was like, before I did it, it felt like a mountain to climb. And it was like I cracked this joke, or I said something that kind of lightened the mood. And it just like made all the difference in the experience of life. And it was like immediately I felt connected to him again. And so then Eric said, okay, fast forward years, how has this changed? And I was still like waiting for him to come home, but the waiting was like, I was looking out the window like anxiously, like he should be coming soon. And it was pure joy. And just like, where is he? Before it was like, where the fuck is he? What the fuck has he been doing? God, get your ass home. And instead it was just like so excited to see him. Just this like pure excitement for that moment and what that moment meant. And that feeling in my heart, like the re-scripting or the rewriting of that mealtime scene where I lightened the vibe of it and we connected, and then years later how that shifted our connection and how I felt when he was coming home, it was completely different, and our lives were exactly the same. And so I take that with me because it's a real good reminder of like how our emotions, how our perception of this world really makes this world what it is to us. And that's true for me, it's true for you, it's true for everybody. And that's why it's so important for us to like really listen to other people. And if their experience is different than ours or different what we think it should be, to get curious and non-judgmental. Like that is their world. That was my world. And I changed it in that memory, in that hypnosis session. And that changed it in me. I don't forget that. And I remember it often if I'm in a new relationship with someone, or if I'm tackling a new project or trying something new, and I start to think of like, oh, I shouldn't even do this because, it's not going to work out. And if I just stop now, it's not going to be as painful, or less people are going to be disappointed. And I can see how that is a source of disconnection. Like it's so easy for me to see that. And so now that, again, it's like it was eliminated after that session in the space of my relationship, which is why I went to that session. And still, it affects every part of my life, because when I start to catastrophize, when I start to think I should just run now before we all get hurt even more, I can see now, no, that's just a flag for me being like, hey, are there some red flags here I need to pay attention to? Like legit, real, logical things, dots I can connect? No? Okay, well, here's that old story again of things are not going to go well. And so could I rewrite this? Like if I've spent the last 10 minutes fantasizing about worst case scenario, the memory of this rewrite, the memory of this past life regression and how this life changed with just simple shifts like at that dinner table. Now when I feel that catastrophe thinking building, it's not a way of life. It's not a bridge burner. It doesn't point me in a certain direction for my career, or who I'm in relationship with. It's literally just a flag to be like, hey, you're catastrophizing. That's all it is. That's it. You want to think about something else? Want to think about best case scenario for a while and even it out? Want to try one of the hobbies that are in your life now that you're not waiting for everybody? It sticks with me. It's not only the changes that we have in the intention and the area of our life why we went to that session, but it's like the skills and the knowing that we take from it that we can apply to our lives in so many other ways if we want to. After I experienced those past life memories and went through the death scene, then in that space of spiritual guidance, Eric, the hypnotist I was working with, brought me through a releasing modality to release this fear and that I had been carrying in that past life that I carried over into this life as Gina. And then we released that fear, and then we filled that space with just this pure loving energy. And I wanted that pure loving energy to fill me with like a vibrancy and excitement for life. And I believe this energetic release of the fear has allowed me to even see like more opportunities that would encourage me to feel more joyful and excited about life. And it feels so good still today. And like, who doesn't want to be able to see more opportunities that are a real opportunity for me, not just other people? Because I often see like, oh, that's so cool for you. And it's like, I want that, but I just like don't even think it's an opportunity for me. Which, like, little tangent, being someone who flirts with non-monogamy and just openness in that sense, the question always comes in of like jealousy. And it's like, I don't experience jealousy that I know of. And even to the point where I think it's so bizarre and I doubt that so much that I have like researched what is jealousy. And it's my understanding that I maybe personally don't feel jealousy because I never feel a sense of entitlement over anyone. And so you can do what you want to do, and you're going to do what you want to do. And I'm just going to kind of stay awake and see if I want to participate and stay aware of like what's really happening. So little tangent, but I wonder of like what in that realm specifically of jealousy, and jealousy is not the only realm where this comes into play in my life, but where it's like, what is a healthy kind of detachment and like a compassionate way of loving, I believe, and what is me not believing something is for me. And in terms of, I brought up non-monogamy, in terms of monogamy, non-monogamy, those labels aren't important to me. It's more just like I want a love that's like compassionate and open and non-controlling. So in that space, I feel like I've examined it. But even in that space, it was like, am I having like entitlement issues here? Is this like a low self-worth thing here where I don't feel like people want that with me? Am I afraid of that commitment? You know, just re-examining that. And this past life regression has helped me kind of keep those things in check. Like, what is a healthy openness and what is me just being like, that's not for me, I can't have it. And not even on a conscious level. Believing it as such a truth that it's not even a question in my mind. It would be as if you were going to go for a run and I didn't have legs. It's like, I'm so happy that you can run. It's not an option for me. I'm not even questioning it. I'm not even wondering if I'm going to go on a run later. And I do that all the time with like ability and opportunity in entrepreneurship, at work, with friends, with lovers, whatever. So for me, this past life regression, it just like highlights and again, just something that is difficult for me, which is, I don't know, like thinking I'm good enough, thinking certain opportunities are for me or are not for me. And like I said before, I am like uncovering a new layer of this as we do. That is life. It's spiralic. I was in no way, shape, or form ready to have these perspectives probably even a year ago. But having this past life regression in the rear view, in my heart, re-listening to it at the point I'm at right now, it's like, wow, I can really see that. I can really see like how often I missed opportunities that could have challenged me, made me feel more joyful and excited about life. And I just didn't even think that they were an opportunity for me. And who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want more opportunities for that stuff, right? Okay. So the husband in this past life was a woman who I did not know in 2015. In 2019, when I had recorded this podcast episode reflecting on that 2015 PLR, I had, a couple months prior to that recording, had met a woman at a retreat, and her and I just felt this instant connection. And I felt it, but didn't say anything. She felt it, but didn't say anything. But on the last day at the retreat, she was like, I don't know what it was. Like you drove up and you got out of your car, and I just felt like, oh, thank God she's here. It was like I had been waiting for you, but I didn't know I was waiting for you. And I was like, whoa, I felt the same way when I saw her. And upon reflection, like she had the same big blue eyes and yeah. So I never told her like, oh, you were my husband in a past life. It's just not, I don't know, at this point in my life, and I have always been hypersensitive to people's awkward reactions towards me, and sometimes I just don't want to see someone's awkward reaction toward me or sense their reaction of how weird they think I am, and I don't want to make someone uncomfortable either. Like, why? And in my heart, I knew it, but I bring it up now because I really do think that we often think like, oh, I've had a past life with this person and it's this huge thing. And if it doesn't turn into this deep, resonant connection in our present life, we can feel like, did we do something wrong? What was the part of this? And it really is, people come in and out of our lives for all kinds of reasons. And it's not up to us to, we can, if we want, figure out why or how or what we were at one point in a past life. But what is really important in this life is to be present and to honor like the beauty of a connection today. And if in that is like a past life connection, that's awesome. But that doesn't mean you like need to be together. It doesn't mean you need to put up with someone's bullshit. It doesn't mean you need to, pursue a friendship that maybe wouldn't be there otherwise. And so after this retreat, we were kind of connected a little bit, stayed in touch a little bit, but have lost connection since. And it was beautiful and it was wonderful. And if I see her again, it'll be great. And that's just life. Not everything has to be this like huge lifelong thing to actually mean something. It literally can just be like kind of two people passing and just honoring a really cool feeling between each other, even if our words for it are different. Like, to me, that's really beautiful. Something else that really stuck out to me as I listened to this past life regression in preparation for last week's episode and this episode was this idea that past lives, they're not in the past. So I've shared this before. Who knows what past lives are? I personally don't believe it's in the past. I think we experience the past like we do because we're on a planet that's rotating at a certain speed, orbiting at a certain speed around a star. And that's just how our human minds arrange things. And I think that's wonderful. And to call it a past life, it can even feel like a life that happened in the past, is valid and wonderful. But if you're asking me, Gina, do I believe these lives are taking place in the past? No. I think it's all happening at once. And I think that's why it's even easier to access any life we've lived via hypnosis through our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind holds every memory of everything that's ever happened to us and all the plans for the future. And we know that in every single present moment. And we can use hypnosis to go get that information from our subconscious mind. So are past lives in the past? No. I think they're happening right now. I think they're affecting us right now. Something that people would say to me, and I brought it up in that episode, in episode 163, was this idea of like, people would be like, oh, I want to schedule a past life regression, but like, like it's frivolous and who cares? The past is in the past. It's already happened. What can I do about it now? And first of all, I feel like any fucking human with any kind of drama in their life would be like, obviously the past affects you today. And here on the third dimension on Earth, we have a past. Like, we are living in that world. We do have a past. And some people even say that, like, we are the past made manifest. Our past, the past of the people around us, our ancestors. Yeah, I really do think that it's all happening at once. We can learn things in this life from other lifetimes. We can learn from the pain and the suffering of other lifetimes. We can learn from the strengths and the wins and the ease of other lifetimes just as easily. So they may not be in your past totally, depending on if you're in the third dimension looking at it or out of it. But our other lives, our other soul experiences, I believe it's my experience that they are absolutely affecting us every day. Even in ways, and mostly in ways, we have no idea. And that would be past experiences in this life as this human that you are currently, and other lives that you're living in other parts of the planet, on other planets, on other timelines, etc., etc. It's all just different facets of us, I believe. Another reason I don't believe they're in the past is because I've experienced lives that feel like they're in the past, sure, like, oh, this one, kind of an Old West situation in the United States. In 2023, the 1850s, that is the past. But I've also experienced lives, specifically lives on other planets, where I feel like it's in the future. So I don't know. I think it's probably all happening all at once. But in my human existence, it feels like the past and it can feel like the future. But it can affect me at any moment, because in the present moment, I contain multitudes, just like you. And I can access those multitudes, I can transmute, I can alchemize, I can change the flow of certain energy. But it is all me. And while certain things have put me in positions to like carry fears or burdens that are not mine to carry, I can use these spaces to like examine ways to release it, new ways of being, and just greater wisdom that my soul has accumulated through time. So let's talk about silence. One of the things that was so strong was the silence at the end of that life, the boredom, the loud, loud silence. And ever since then, I talk about it in the episode that was originally recorded in 2019, episode 163. I had talked about like intentionally creating a relationship to silence, intentionally spending time in silence. And how for me at that time, it was really about like noticing after this past life regression how much I avoid that. And knowing that that's an urge in my body, I started to see how that showed up in other places. And then I was able to see like, well, why? Like, why do I constantly need background noise? And what are these thoughts that I'm trying to drown out? And through those times of silence and intentionally kind of even being uncomfortable in that space, I really started to notice like the thoughts and the stories in my head. And anytime we do that, it's just an effort of getting to know ourselves better, which can be fucking frightening. It can be freeing. It can be very illuminating. It can be very depressing. It can be very invigorating. It can build confidence, like when we start to notice that and make shifts and changes that benefit us. And when we get to know ourselves, we can understand like what we want and what we truly need. And in that space, then we can actually ask for what we want and what we need, and we can get the help and support that we want and we need, and we can do the things that light us up, and we can try new things and find even more things that light us up. And that is a fucking game changer. Like oftentimes people will ask me like, how do you stay safe on a road trip? Or how do you know when you're in danger or not? Or you seem to have made a lot of changes. How did you know what you needed? And it all comes down to me asking myself two questions. How do you feel? What do you need? How do you feel? What do you need? Doing that over and over the course of years has completely changed my life. And I, I got there a few different ways, and being comfortable in understanding what comes up in silence is one of those ways. And still, I have a very spiralic relationship with silence. Like, I'm in a space right now where it's like, I feel like I'm kind of in it. I'm feeling a lot, as I described before. I'm kind of uncovering a new layer to see like how insidious and destructive some of my belief systems have been just to me. It feels all very dramatic right now. It probably sounds dramatic. In these heavier times, I allow myself to listen to way more music, podcasts, audiobooks, just a lot less silence than normal. And that's okay. Like, it kind of pulses. Like, when I'm really going through it, I am intentionally focusing on it. I am intentionally working on it. And I don't need to be thinking about it all the time. And so that's the way I'm taking care of myself right now. So just like a little bit less silence, more intentionally focused silence and inward reflection. So it's not always about living in complete silence, it's just about like understanding what happens when you do, and how do you feel, and what do you need. It's that simple for me, at least. I mean, it's simple, but it's not like easy to do. So knowing that I've been just in this process of like understanding how I feel and what I need and what's going on in my mind in silence, it really to me is tied to the part of this past life regression from 2015 where, in the space of spiritual guidance, one of the things that came in was about like me figuring out my intention for how I want to live and then living like it. And it was something that I repeated, and I remember it just repeating in my head, where it's like, what's your intention? How do you want to live? And then actually live like it. And so that was from the spirit guidance portion. So that could be coming from my spirit guides, my higher self. And it was so clear and so repetitive that it was like, if you want something, know it and go get it. If you want to be a certain way, be it. And if something that you do is sabotaging that, if something else is causing you to have a reaction that makes it feel impossible, if you want to feel this way, but you associate with people who don't want that for you, it's about figuring out your intention, what you want, and then actually living like it, not waiting to live like it, but like get more of that in your life today. And I have taken that with me for sure. And hypnosis has helped me put this even deeper inside of me. It's not uncommon for me to meet someone new, like just this road trip I was on over Labor Day. I was at a concert, and so met a bunch of people, and a lot of waiting around, a lot of chit chat, at the campsite. And people will often be like, whoa, how do you have the courage to travel so much? And what is this work that you do? And how do you actually live in a way where work is not your number one and you try to squeeze in everything else around it? And part of that is like 8+ years of having experiences like this, having experiences where my higher self is making it so clear, my spirit guides are making it so clear. I'm having past life memories that I feel in my entire body that help me to feel and push me in that direction of like, if you say this is what you want in your life, go get it. How long have you been holding something that you want and you have not taken action on it? Or maybe you think you want something, but you haven't even taken action on it. You don't even know if you want it. I used to be there. All the time. And I'm sure on some level we'll all kind of be there, at different transition points in our life. But for me, that is something I can see from that past life regression on, is like this big shift of like, if you want it, live like you want it. Live like you have it. At least live like you want it. Don't be blocking it. Don't be making choices that make that thing you want fucking impossible. And in hypnosis, in that session alone and every session since, And all the experiences I've had with the hundreds of clients that I've worked with in these past life regressions is it's like when we get that clarity, that insight, that wisdom in the space of hypnotic trance, it will change us in that instant. It might not change our life in that instant because we've spent years and decades creating it, but it will change us. And when it changes you, you will show up differently in your life. Things might feel more uncomfortable or painful, but then you're going to see more opportunities for things that you actually want and shifts that you can make to get there. And hypnosis for me has really made that like easy, effortless, automatic. And for that, I am thankful. And having that insight just really hitting into my heart, my mind, my body. If you want it, live like it. You know, what's your intention? Live like you want it. Make moves like you're going to get it. That, like I said, not only changed me, but it changes me in the sense of like it brings awarenesses to the front that help me identify things getting in my way. It helps me identify things that are like so out of alignment with what I actually want, because I have this motivation in my heart of like, if I don't want it, why? And I don't need to have it. Like, why do I have it? Why do I have to do this thing? Is there a better way? Is there something else I can do? And that happened to me. I was at a funeral like 2.5 years ago, and it was like a distant family member, and I did not know this person well. I knew of them for decades, but I didn't like know them well. And at the funeral, it was really interesting to hear their loved ones talk about them. And one of the things they said about this person who had passed away was they loved life so much. And like everyone who knew them personally would agree they loved life. And I remember sitting at that funeral and I looked at my sister and I was like, not one person would say that about me. Not one person would be like, oh, Gina, yeah, she loved life. And we had a chuckle about it, like a nice cynical chuckle. And then I kept thinking about it because it's so strong in my heart to like live with intention and do everything I can to get this life as sweet as I can for me. Hearing myself say that to someone, hearing myself being like, I don't like life, and not one person would disagree with that. It's like, why am I even here? There's something in my conscious mind that hears that and will not let go of it. And since then, I bought a van. I drove 40,000 miles in a year in that van, traveling, doing what I've been waiting to do for over 10 years. And now, since then, now I have a truck and a little travel trailer. I sleep in the back of my truck if I don't have my travel trailer. And I've put another 20,000 miles on just traveling in the last year. And I have had so much growth, and I have gained so much strength and so much confidence, and I have lost so much of my fear over those 2 years and 60,000 miles. And that was, I say the catalyst for that was like being at that funeral, being like, I don't like life. Like no one would say that to me. And it was really like, something in the back of my mind was like, we don't like that. Let's get to work on it. What kind of life do we not want to leave? And travel was in it for me, and like a lot of alone time and gaining wisdom and strength out there alone. So, you know, even 8 years later, it's still so impactful. I love hypnosis, man. Okay, so let's dig into relationship stuff. Like, where am I at now? So like I said, in 2015, when I had this first past life regression, Alex and I had been together for years. We were thinking about getting married. I was like, wanted to, but didn't want to do, a real double Dutch situation. Yes, no. But in my heart, I could feel like I wanted to, and I could feel like the block was something that is just a familiar feeling in me where it's like this block is something that I don't want to be there. This isn't like my intuition saying, this is a red flag, you shouldn't do it. So that's where I was there. I described a little bit about how, to me, that's exactly what I needed. I'm glad I didn't. That's not the container for me anymore. And it's not the container for Alex either anymore. And in 2019, we were married. We were thinking about opening up our relationship into like the non-monogamy territory is what I mean by that when I say opening it up. And to me, that wasn't something that was like out of left field. It was, I had been reading about and intrigued by non-monogamy since before I even met Alex. And so it was just something I was interested in, podcasts I would listen to, books I would read. And because him and I were living together, I would talk about the things I was consuming and the entertainment, and non-monogamy was one of them. So it was never like this weird thing. And it was just kind of like just another option out there for us as our relationship kind of grew and changed and became less compatible or whatever. I mean, less compatible. I don't know if that's a good word to say, but like just as our relationship evolved into whatever it is evolving into. And so having those thoughts and kind of making those plans, you know, just talking about that. And then COVID hit, worldwide pandemic, really make you think. And I had gone to that funeral during COVID and had just been like, I don't love life. Like, what don't I like about it? And I wanted to travel alone. And I always felt like I was waiting for Alex to travel. And I was always waiting for a person to travel with. I was always waiting for the money to travel with. I was always waiting for Alex to travel with me. And I just started being like, fuck it. Like, I'm not waiting anymore. I just can't even do it anymore. And it was like the pandemic, I think we all were in a holding pattern, like waiting for news about what's going on, waiting for news about when it's going to get better, waiting for news about when we can go back to life as normal, whatever the fuck that means. In that waiting was like, again, that familiar feeling of like, nope, we're creating. We're not waiting. We're going to create a life. Anytime I'm waiting, I should be creating, whether it's like participating in a hobby, thinking of something new to do, whatever. I don't necessarily mean like productivity creating. I mean, just like in that ease and flow and the beauty of creation, of life, of what it is to be a human. So all of those things were kind of going on. I was traveling a lot. I was uncovering a lot of like fear and rage around what it is to be a woman who's so afraid to travel and what that means. And at the same time, the world was kind of starting to open up. So I was like dating people and really just realizing that like, wow, dating people is so so triggering. I mean, not always, but, and in that I was really starting to see like, I don't want to be thought of as in a partnership anymore. If you remember, in 2015 and 2019, when I recorded those episodes or recorded, the episode that I re-aired last week, I was really craving like that partnership and that, just that safe space. And I thought that they were the same. And what I can say, short and sweet, as short as this could possibly be, is that to me, they became very separate, of like partnership and safety are not the same thing. And it was really just an awakening to my own power, and not that Alex did anything, not that I did anything. It was just like this awakening to my own power that I wanted to explore. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you remember this. I don't know if you listened to an episode where I maybe mentioned it, but I grew up as an identical twin. I'm a twin. And so it was almost like I was always a part of a pair, and that was always very safe to me. And I do believe that's why I chose to be a twin. And it was like my whole life was with her, and she got married and moved out. We were no longer roommates. And then like 2 or 3 years later, I met Alex. And in the 2-3 years between the two, it was very, or maybe it wasn't even that long. It was maybe actually just like a year between like not living with my twin and then being like romantically partnered with Alex. And that year was like, my dog died during that year. Had my first nephew during that year. That year was like not at all normal, very emotionally tumultuous. So I don't really consider that a time where I felt like I was really stepping into my own. And I just really felt like traveling a lot, dating, just what I was feeling Alex and I were evolving into, being partnered was just not in me anymore. And I don't know if, there's a number of things at play, and Alex and I have a long history of having difficult, awkward conversations in loving and compassionate ways. And so that definitely allowed us to continually talk about how we felt in our partnership. And as those feelings changed, to continue to talk about it, to work with a therapist, and was just like, I don't want to be married anymore. Like, I still want to share dogs with you. I still want you in my everyday life. You're my best friend. You're my closest family member. I don't want that to change, but I don't want to be your wife. Like, I don't want to be your partner. I don't want people to be like Mrs. Whatever. I don't want people to see me as having, just being half. It was like, I just want to be my own person. I was always a twin. Then I was basically fucking wifed up, devoted my 30s to this man, and I just didn't want that anymore. We both suffer from the type of love where when we love someone, it's like, that's painful and I want this for you and I want it for me. And how can we find a different settling point for wherever it is that we're evolving to? From those conversations started happening about 2.5 years ago. And it just kind of, what would life look like on the other side of that? Are we living together? Are we not? What do our investments look like? What are, whatever, just like financial entanglements. And it took a long time of talking and transitioning to the point where like it took a year after that for like the divorce to be final. And then it took me another year after that to like move into my own place. So it's been incredibly slow, but both Alex and I are very in touch with, or intend to be in touch with, like how we feel, what we need. There it is again. How do you feel? What do you need? And then being a support for the other person without harming ourselves. And that for us just really, really works. And we've both had therapy together and we've both had therapy separate. And I'm obviously super into digging deep with hypnosis. So yeah, that's where we're at today. Now we live in Arizona, both of us. We both decided to move here after we got a divorce, and we share the dogs. We live like a mile apart and we see each other every day, and it's just a really great source of support and laughter and lightness in my life. And I am beyond thankful. It's one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is how Alex and I have finessed the last 12 plus years. I sometimes look at that and I'm just like, wow, if I can do that, maybe I can do a lot more than I think. Because in all honesty, and most of the people who listen to this podcast are women or have a strong feminine energy. And oftentimes we are the ones to lead the change in our household, to lead the change in our partnerships, in our friendships. And it's a heavy burden to carry. And sometimes it can feel like we want to resent it, but that's the truth. And so when I look at that, and when I look at, yes, he had to show up. Yes, he had to be open and compassionate and loving. And he is his own person, but I very much led that. And I'm so proud of it. Just like I think with past life regression, how going through that death scene and experiencing death and experiencing deathbed remorse and regret and honoring can change your life. I think that if we could find other ways to see divorce, to experience divorce, we wouldn't be so fucking terrified and hate-filled when it's time to transition a relationship to a different status. So I don't know. There's so much in that. It's hard for me to explain it. So I don't know. I feel really lucky. I have gotten to a point where if someone's like wants to get married, I'm like, pick someone who you think would be a very loving, pleasant ex. And I know it's maybe a very Scorpio way to look at it. But like, if this person's gonna be a fucking asshole to you when they're not like humping your leg, why do you even want them in your life? It's my view. take from it what you want. So yeah, ask me your questions if you want. Again, I'm open to questions on all of this. I could go much deeper on all of it, but I'm also like, maybe you don't want to hear it. And if you don't want to hear it, I'm not going to say it. Okay, a couple things about the deathbed wisdom, actually, while I'm on it. Being pulled out of my body, like that sensation that I described in that past life regression, I've only had that once. And I think that that is so special and not needed. So what I'm talking about was, as I was experiencing that death scene under hypnotic trance, I felt a physical sensation of like something being pulled out of me. And I just think that it can happen, it can not happen. And I think it's really cool to experience that sensation. I've never experienced it since, and still I get so much from a death scene. And what I wanted to highlight there was like, whoa, I've never had a death scene like that again. And all the death scenes I've had have been so different and so impactful. And again, it just makes me say, if you've never done a hypnosis session, or the next hypnosis session that you do, it's so important to just get open, get weird, just observe what comes to mind. It's probably going to be a situation you've never thought you'd encounter before. Just go with it. It's still impactful. Another thing that stuck out to me that I just want to, as like the teacher in me just wants to really highlight, is after that space of spiritual guidance, or in that space of spiritual guidance, Eric, the hypnotist of this session that I did in 2015, he invited me to talk to the higher self of my husband, because I was like nervous to see him on my deathbed. If you remember, my big thing was like, I'm just afraid to see him. I feel like I failed him, and now I have to like talk to him, and I'm super nervous. And Eric was like, let's call his higher self forward and say something to him. And I was able to express to him just like how I felt. I was able to get love back from him. And that is so cathartic and healing and peace-giving, to be able to take this burden, this wrong, and have someone be like, set that down. I'm not even thinking about that. Like, your perspective is your perspective, but it's not mine. And so you're just like hurting yourself with this, and set it down. To me, when we can connect with someone who we feel like there's things left unsaid, it is so, it's just like so lightening. It just lightens the load. It gives us so much peace. And you can do this in a hypnosis session. So if you have a hypnosis session scheduled, and you're like, at least the way I do hypnosis sessions, you go through the past life scenes into the spiritual guidance. If you wanted to try to connect with someone's higher self, whether they're here on earth or they've passed away, or maybe you weren't walking on earth with them in this life, we can call their higher self forward no matter where they are, and have these conversations with them. So keep that in mind for your session, and to know that, like, yes, we can do that in hypnosis, and you can do this without hypnosis. Like, you can do this in meditation. You can do it when you feel like you need it. If you feel like you have something to say to someone, you can just get quiet and say, I call forward their higher self, and just speak it. A lot of times what we have to say is just about getting it out. And if someone's there to receive it, that's awesome. But the getting out of it is so lightening, is so peace-giving. It allows us to release fear. It allows us to relax a little bit. It allows us to kind of broaden the scope of things, opportunities, realities around us that maybe aren't so narrow and fearful. It's just a really great skill. And I just want you to know that you can do that at any time. So if you're carrying the load of a conversation that you haven't had, I encourage you to journal it, to say it out loud, say it on a walk, scream it into a pillow, say it while you're driving. Just say it. Get it out. Okay. I think that's everything. Okay, so like I said, I'm open to talking more about this. Email me any questions that you have. Gina, Jina, at pastlivesandthedivine.com. And just send me your kind and curious questions only, please. Leave your judgmental or nasty comments. They will be burned upon receipt. So I would love to hear your questions, though. A lot of times I have questions that are like hey, why do you use daughter-in-law instead of stepdaughter? And it would come off as like negative. And I love deep questions. It makes me feel like you're listening. It makes me feel like you care, and it makes me feel like we're actually having a conversation. So if you have a question about any of this, please let me know, and it'll give me more ideas for more ways to share my story and to, I don't know, create more fun things for us to do together. That is our episode for today. Thank you so much for being here. It was a load off doing this. This was really interesting. I'm excited to do the next one. We will see which one I do next. What's your guess? I already have it lined up. I haven't done the episode yet, but I will in the next couple weeks. And next week, you're going to be hearing from me, Meredith from Earthling Astrology, and Ashley from the Yoga Magic podcast. We are going to be talking about asteroid goddesses next week. So hit that subscribe button. As always, take anything that makes your load feel lighter and just leave the rest.